For those of you who right now are kind of like, okay, it's just a stupid chart. In 1833, the same issue will come up. The state of South Carolina is going to freak out, and the United States comes that close to civil war with no reference, none, to slavery. Andrew Jackson sends the U.S. Army to the border of South Carolina. The only reason we did not go to civil war in 1833 is the southern states were terrified of Andrew Jackson. So when people argue that it's all about, no, America was breaking about a lot of issues. That is what this unit. When Jefferson and Hamilton fight, you should begin to notice that there are different issues. With protective tariffs, you need to be very clear. The South argues that they are unconstitutional. The South doesn't just dislike them. The South doesn't just not use them. The South is very adamant. They break the Constitution. The Constitution says tariffs can be created to raise revenue. That's where the controversy comes. Tariffs can be placed to raise revenue. By definition, what does a protective tariff do? Technically, it is a tax. Are we making money? No. Because we don't want people to buy the foreign crap. If nobody buys the foreign crap, do we collect the tax? No. So therefore, the tariff is a sham to really get you to do what? There. If it's a revenue tariff, the tax money goes to and everybody benefits. If it's a protective tariff, it is helping who? Industry manufacturers. If you are a southern farmer, do you see any benefit of a protective tariff? Does anyone help you with your crap? Now think of it from life, liberty, what's the last one? Property. The South's biggest argument is this is a dollar hat. I am now paying $1.40. That is that 40 cents is my property, right? I am paying more money. What do I get? The North is getting jobs. The North is selling their stupid hats. Be very clear. The South doesn't just dislike them. The South isn't just like, well, we would rather. The South believes it violates the Constitution because the agreement was tariffs should raise revenue. Did I have any questions?
But wouldn't the protective tariff, because they're trying to focus on American goods, wouldn't that indirectly?
Well, in fact, the South would argue the opposite. If we raise our tariffs, which would basically, we are keeping what out of our country? Foreign goods. Other countries would therefore get mad at us, right? What products does America make the most of? Why couldn't other countries put tariffs on our raw materials? If they want to hurt America, what if they raise the tax on cotton and tobacco? Then the farmers would get nailed with more expensive finished crap, and the other countries wouldn't be able to buy. So that is what they're afraid of. Other countries will retaliate with what America is good at to try to encourage English tobacco or English cotton. Does that make sense? Questions? Yes or no? Does everybody get the difference between the two types, revenue and protective? Ladies and gentlemen, above the report on manufacturing, please, please, please write fails. There are 4 Hamilton plans. Tariff 79, report on public credit, report on the National Bank, and the report on manufacturing. The 4th one fails. I've already mentioned the problem of 1833. This problem doesn't go away. The North firmly believes they need this to allow them to compete. The South, weakness of the North. So the report on manufacturing fails. Any questions? What? Hamilton could not get enough support this time. George Washington did not weigh in. Remember with the bank, Washington said that it would be better for the country. Washington would not come in, and the southern states are adamant. The South was able to rally enough support that it fails. Did we, just so I make sure, and I know because all my classes did it differently, did we mention the Currency Act, the gold, the silver coins? All right, real quickly, I'm going to do that. Go back to the report on public credit, specifically redemption. It doesn't have to go here. It is a separate law, but it honestly makes the most sense. So if you go back to report on public credit, in fact, even if you were doing more of an essay, it makes sense to place it here. All right. In redemption, which is part of the report on public credit, everybody clear? The government is trying to, what is the money problem? What was the money problem of redemption?
Too much paper money.
Paper money was worthless. So we take paper and exchange it for bonds. Bonds eventually will be turned into a what's the proper name? Because anytime a certificate. Does everybody understand? There's been paper money certificate? Ladies and gentlemen, a certificate means paper. It could be coins, but it is backed by gold. With pure paper money, it is literally just paper, the word of the government. With a certificate, every time they print one, there has to be gold or silver. In the Currency Act, we established two things. Number one, you should all know it. Starting in 1792, the United States of America said that our monetary system will be called dollars and cents. So number one, this is the law that comes up with the term dollars and cents. Some of you are like, well, what? No, you could have had Deutschmarks or yens or euros or whatever you wanted. Probably more importantly, and you will see this a lot throughout the class here and there, starting in 1792, we created this. We determined that our money would be developed on a ratio of 15 to 1. So literally, $1 equaled 1 ounce of silver. Hence, some of you may know this, we had a silver dollar. If any of you have one of those big coins at home, they were 1 ounce of silver. The way the law was is if you had $15, 15 ounces of silver, there was a gold coin. Ladies and gentlemen, an ounce of gold was worth $15. We had a gold coin that used to be a golden eagle. In the old days, that was the ratio. But please remember, even if you had paper, you had the right to take your paper and exchange it for gold or silver. Our money was bond metal. Gold or silver was the real currency. The only other thing you might want to know about the Currency Act is when this law was passed, a lot of people felt what individual was becoming very powerful and influential? Hamilton. Jefferson isn't a big fan of his, is he? The weird thing about this law, and it comes up once in a while, is when the Congress made the Currency Act, the Congress, in order to try to avoid Hamilton, deliberately gave the power to print money to the Secretary of State. And does that make any sense? No. Because they deliberately tried to bypass the treasurer because they were afraid he was having too much control over the economic system. Questions with this? Does everybody understand that this is the certificates? This is the new money, so that's why it makes sense to put it with redemption. Legitimacy, I am sorry. Depending on how you want to do your math, there's 3 examples. Technically, we could argue that things we've talked about already. I mean, if you want to give more examples, remember when Hamilton assumed the state debt, so states had to be more loyal. That would be legitimacy. Legitimacy is forcing loyalty. It is forcing people to respect. Dealing with your problems is legitimacy. With Washington, the legitimacy that we are focusing on, and I know it is hard to understand, is legitimacy or respect from who, really? Americans. Folks, yes, I mean, the foreign thing, and to some degree trying to fix our money would help that too, Jays, Pickneys. The legitimacy is our own people did not respect the country. Remember, people did not, some states didn't want to ratify it. North Carolina and Rhode Island still haven't ratified. That was the issue. Remember when we talked about all the people who borrowed money in the states? There was people who openly were saying America's too big. The government is too far away. So how do you do that? George Washington will have 2 main examples and a third kind of if you are. Number 1, this is his main, folks, this is deliberate. This is not an accident. This is not by chance. Some of you in this room firmly believe in this. Absolutely. Some of you think it's crazy and stupid. George Washington is a huge supporter of what is called pomp and circumstance. And when I say a huge supporter, George Washington was adamant. If you wanted to get George Washington mad, if you wanted to get him angry, you go against this. Pomp and circumstance is image. When George Washington was president, he was adamant. There was a dress code. All public figures had to have, this is how you were supposed to look. You were to be well groomed. You were to use proper manners. Washington believed that our government would earn respect by looking a certain way, by showing people that we were professional. A crazy example of this is because the government had so little money, when the government would put on like dinners or parties at the White House, there wasn't money for food and things. Washington would buy the finest wine, the finest food, and pay for it out of his own pocket. Why? Washington believed if we were having people from other countries, if we were having our own citizens, we needed to set the image that the government was successful, that the government was organized. So before I go any farther, is Washington right or wrong? Does that matter? Does pomp and circumstance still have a purpose?
Yes, because if you go into something like a lawyer's office, you don't want them walking around in sweats and looking like they don't care or take anything seriously.
For those of you who do not know, a lawyer is probably one of the best examples you could come up with. For any of you in this room who might want to be a lawyer, if you go into court and you do not have a matching suit, if your shoes would be tennis shoes, some judges will immediately hold you in contempt of court. You are disrespecting the court, you are making a mockery of the proceedings, and you yourself will be punished by the judge. Courtrooms are supposed to be exceedingly respectful. It is enforced by a judge. Do the rest of you agree to this? I see people shaking. Now here's my question. Then how come the vast majority of us tend to be casual? Let's be honest, even Mr. Cleveland, this is more a business. I don't have a suit on. I don't have a coat on. Why? So are we all more lazy? Or is it Mr. Washington wrong? And for those of you who need defense because you're weak, Thomas Jefferson, the third president, will not support pomp and circumstance.
This is an environment that doesn't demand absolute professionalism.
When you say it's an environment that doesn't, so education is not serious. Ladies and gentlemen, if you went to one of the high-end private schools of America, the schools where 90% of the kids go to Ivy League, will they be dressed like you?
No.
Many of them will have uniforms. Ladies and gentlemen, you know the crazy thing is when I used to teach forum, every year one of the topics we'd have is school uniforms. And originally kids would be, oh, that's stupid and dumb and naive. And you know what crazy thing would happen every year by the end of the conversation? The vast majority of the students would honestly say they might not have. For those of you who want more defense for Mr. Jefferson, anybody know the Google company? What are they famous for? They're supposed to have the most what? They are supposed to have the friendliest, funnest, most laid-back work style. On desks, people are encouraged to have little like toys and trinkets. People dress very casual. They have all sorts of fun activity days. I'm just saying, you have one of the most successful companies in the world. It has worked. All right, do it this way. Think in your head. I'm not gonna. I mean, if you want, I want you to imagine that you start a business. You're making money. Okay? You own a business. You sell crap to the public. Don't care what you sell. You think of your own interest. Now, your business is doing well. You need to hire people who are going to work for you and are going to represent you. They are going to sell your product and make you money. I want you to imagine your head, maybe even pick people in the school. As they come walking in, what are you going to want to present to your business? Are you going to hire the guy with the long hair? Would you hire the guy with the ripped up pants? Would you hire the guy who in the interview sort of talks really casual and slangish? They're going to be selling your product. It's real simple. If all of a sudden it's your money at stake, what would you prefer? You have 3 or 4 candidates. Would you prefer the person who you feel is a little bit more laid back? Or would you prefer a person who's going to be a little bit more professional? There's not necessarily a right or wrong answer, but let's be honest. When people are a little bit more professional, it does often sort of have this image of, this is important. I take it seriously. Make no mistake, the pomp and circumstance is something George Washington established every single day he was president, and the idea of an official, they were very well dressed, they were very well mannered, it was an image. Jefferson's benefit is what? The government had done that for 12 years, people were used to it, and then Jefferson begins to back off. Ladies and gentlemen, the next item is called the Whiskey Rebellion, or the Whiskey Tax. This one is actually a much easier example. If you're trying to figure out legitimacy, this one should be easier to explain. I'm not saying pomp and circumstance is hard, but with the pomp and circumstance, you have to explain how dressing well creates respect. Ladies and gentlemen, in 1792, the United States passed an 8 cents a gallon whiskey tax. So our first item is we pass a whiskey tax. I mean, clearly we all know whiskey was a common product, but it's kind of a luxury item. Does anyone know, some of the people might remember from last year, who was America's largest distiller of whiskey in 1790s? George Washington. Ladies and gentlemen, the United States government passed a tax that the very president was the largest taxpayer. The tax went into place like every other tax, people paid the tax, and here comes the controversy. After several years, some bozo happened to go walking or happened to take a trip to Frontier, Pennsylvania. When the guy was in Frontier, Pennsylvania, what does he discover? For the last 100 years in Pennsylvania history, you know those frontier people who live in the wilderness, who live back by the Indians? For 100 years, the people of the frontier of Pennsylvania, they would have their grain bin to feed their animals, to make bread, and at the end of the year, when the new harvest came, the people of frontier Pennsylvania had learned you scrape out whatever grain is left, you dump in this year's grain, and then you take the leftover grain and you make your own moonshine, whiskey. The people of frontier Pennsylvania had done, and they would drink it themselves, and occasionally they would sell it to neighbors. They would sell it at flea markets. Some of you are beginning to figure out, what's the question going to be? Why are they not paying the tax? The law says, if you produce and sell whiskey, there is an 8 cents tax. By the definition of the law, they should have to pay. Some person, of course, complains. The government thinks about, all right. So the government sends a tax collector. Is everybody with me right now? Tax collector Bob, and I'm making that up, goes to the frontier. He asks around. They simply point out, Keaton, he has whiskey. The tax collector goes to his house, knocks on the door. I hear you're selling whiskey. Yeah. How much did you have this year? Oh, I had about 18 gallons. And of course, the guy gives him a bill. At this moment, Frontier Keaton, who lives off in the nowhere, surrounded by Indians, remembers what slogan? Does Keaton really remember doing a lot of voting in the frontier? Does Keaton really remember any representative coming and talking to him? Keaton basically grabs the tax collector by the scruff of his neck, says, get the heck off my land or I will kill you. What problem do we have? Ladies and gentlemen, so one, you have a tax, but what's the bigger problem now? What is bigger than I didn't pay? Ladies and gentlemen, the people of the frontier are saying, we don't have to do it. We are not going to do it. We refuse. What is the job of the executive? Enforce. There is a law, and what is Pennsylvania saying? We're not going to do it. Ladies and gentlemen, you have two drastically different issues here. And guess who's going to represent them? Let's look at Jefferson first. Get used to that. Ladies and gentlemen, on the test, there will be a half dozen questions or more where you have to identify what would a Federalist or an Anti-Federalist think. You need to be able to put yourself in the brain of the two men and identify how are they going to represent an issue. That is important, really important. Jefferson, the law is poorly written. I think that was kind of what I was saying here. Jefferson is going to argue that the law is the problem. Clearly, did we mean to tax these people? Seriously? No, this was a mistake. Jefferson argues we should rewrite the law, we should fix the law, we should modify it. Jefferson's second point is if we're having a problem with the Pennsylvanians, we should contact Pennsylvania. They will know the men, they will understand the people, and let Pennsylvania handle it. Thomas Jefferson believes this is a minor problem. Why would you blow it up into a bigger problem? If you want one more example of why Jefferson thinks this is absolutely ludicrous, Jefferson, just like Hamilton, says, look, I can do math too. Jefferson points out that in order to hire a tax collector, send him to the frontier, by the calculated guess of the amount of tax, the government would actually lose money. We would literally be paying the tax collector more than the amount of revenue garnished from the tax. What sense would that make? That is Jefferson. Does everybody understand Jefferson? Jefferson is focusing on what is the problem. The law. The law is poorly written. The law is backwards. In fact, these people are pointing out a flaw. Fix it. Hamilton. At this moment, I'm going to say something exceedingly sarcastic, although there is truth in it. Please understand I'm exaggerating. Hamilton killed him. Now, when I say not being literal, in Hamilton's point of view, what is the only thing that matters here? No, not the tax issue.
Obeying the government.
They disobeyed the government. Folks, Hamilton is very clear. We have had a government that has existed for a short period of time. We have gotten through our revolution. If citizens learn that they can openly defy, threaten, argue, what will they always do? In our society, we can vote. We can hire a lawyer. We can write a petition. Do you have the right to punch the tax collector? Alexander Hamilton flat out believes this is a rebellion. The citizens of Pennsylvania are challenging the authority of what? The government. The government's law must be absolute. There's no doubt the two men have a very different opinion. Is the problem the law? Is the problem the rebellion? Washington, of course, will make the decision. Washington very clearly sides with Hamilton. Washington, in this case, believes Jefferson is wrong, Hamilton is right, and the issue is the rebellion. Washington is not saying he likes the law. That's not the point. Once there is a revolt or rebellion, it trumps the law. The rebellion must be the issue. Now listen carefully, because I believe this is where you see Washington, for his lack of education, is brilliant. There is no doubt. You see, Washington is the most amazing president. Folks, George Washington creates an army of 13,000. For those of you who are writing it down, that is bigger than any army George Washington commanded in the Revolution. George Washington raises a 13,000-man army. He then leads the army to the frontier of Pennsylvania himself. Why did I say this is brilliant? Why is this absolute? Why is this cool and amazing? What happens when you send 13,000 soldiers to Pennsylvania led by the President of the United States?
Immediate surrender.
It's like shock and awe, right? These Pennsylvanians with their rifle in their hand look over the hill and, oh crap. And then after they go, oh crap, they go, holy cow, who's that on the horse? Remember, George is big. The white hair, that's, holy crap, that's George. Do you think the frontier people of Pennsylvania want to challenge George? Ladies and gentlemen, the point of what Washington did is he said two things. Number one, you can't disobey the law. But number two, he prevented there from being bloodshed. George Washington's overreaction made sure that he made his point, but he did it in a way that he made sure that the Pennsylvanians, this will not be disputed. I think a smaller army, you would have had more conflict. It's a brilliant decision. Again, why can't we do that every time? You're right, it would get expensive. Washington set a precedent. Laws are enforced. If you don't like it, there are ways to go about it. Next, Washington's farewell address. Please do not be afraid to ask questions if there's something you do not understand. Summary. George Washington became president in 1789. In 1792, I hope you all know, George Washington announced, I don't want to be president. Farewell address. Ladies and gentlemen, after 4 years, George Washington announced, I don't want to be president. He said, I'm retiring. Does everybody hear that? In 1792, Hamilton and Jefferson ran to him and said, no, you can't, we'll fight, we'll argue, we'll bicker, the country's not ready, please. Ladies and gentlemen, George Washington was begged and pleaded, the country needs you. In 1792, George Washington ran again. unanimously elected. In 1796, George Washington announces, I retire. Once again, what happened? What happened when he said, I retire?
They begged him.
People came and begged. Ladies and gentlemen, people respected Washington. People liked Washington. And you know the amazing thing Washington said? The country is ready. The country needed change. The country will survive. Folks, for 150 years, no man challenged an unwritten rule of George Washington. There was no amendment. There was no law. George Washington established a precedent that 8 years was enough for anyone. And it will stick until Franklin Roosevelt in the Great Depression / with World War II. So in 1796, Washington steps down, and here is the eerie thing. Folks, the cool thing about Washington is you have a man of the people. He was a rich aristocrat. He was a farmer, not an exceedingly well-educated man, but look at how well he understood America. In Washington's farewell, he gives the rah-rah, go America, I love my country, and he basically says, hey Americans, there are 3 things I see as trouble. I see problems in the future. 3. They're amazingly simple. The problem is, he has been really good. The problem number 1, George Washington warned of regional bickering. Regional bickering. Folks, George Washington said that people are beginning to identify themselves as Virginians and Massachusetts, Northerners, Southerners. The problem George Washington identified, of course, eventually transpires into
Civil
War.
War.
Problem 2 he identified, entangled alliances. We will see as we start France in a minute, that's where it actually came from. Folks, an entangled alliance is where you shake a person's hand and say, I will be there for you. I will protect you. I will get your back. Ladies and gentlemen, that sounds noble. That sounds very ethical. What George Washington, when you promise to help someone, you have committed yourself and you give away your choice, your freedom. You end up getting pulled into other people's problems and conflicts. And for those of you who do not know, in 1914, one man is assassinated. Within 48 hours, the entire world erodes into worldwide conflict. At the end of World War I, over 20 million people are dead. And most people, as the war began, could not really identify to you why we started. Archduke Francis Ferdinand was assassinated, and before you knew it, countries basically went to alliances, and Russians and the French, and everybody joined into a war. There's 2. Number 3 is bipartisanship. Ladies and gentlemen, George Washington also warned that people would become too connected to their party. People begin to say, I'm a Federalist, I'm a Democratic Republican, I'm a Whig, I'm a populist, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat. Ladies and gentlemen, if you hear people say, I only vote Republican, all Democrats are stupid, that's Washington warning you. Let's be honest, today we put up maps and we call states red and blue. Red is Republican and blue is? We don't identify them as American states. We identify them as Republican or Democrat states. Dangerous. Folks, there's nothing wrong with having different views. There's nothing wrong with being conservative or liberal. The problem, compromise. When you basically believe my party is so morally right and the other party is so morally wrong, I will not work with you. I mean, really, if you look at what Washington is saying, what we have, and as we look in our class, what I ask you to do, folks, the number 1 thing you'll hear about Cleveland is I am never going to advocate a party. I think the parties are stupid. I think each and every one of you should advocate people. I think if you believe an individual is a quality person and they support things you agree with, then you should support them. To blindly support a party is idiotic. Because if you look in our class, what was once Republican, today might be Democrat. The parties have gotten to the point they care more about serving what? The party. The proof of that is if you watch our class, the parties change their issues in order to keep their voters. If the parties were absolutely adamant on a cause, they couldn't change their issues, could they? because this would inherently be a Republican and this would inherently be a Democrat. In that case, ladies and gentlemen, I do believe we are ready for the last and final problem, and that is France, 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 France. Folks, this is a crazy problem, and here, let's just see how smart we've gotten. Anyone want to take a guess who's going to disagree on this? Notice the pattern coming, and do you know what? As Griffin back there has kind of got this smile on his face, some of you are going to screw that up in the test. I'm telling you right now, when you look at the issues, Jefferson and Hamilton's viewpoint, because that really is what begins to kind of create the rift in the country. In fact, you could argue that's kind of what eventually, that rift is the Civil War rift. Because the Jefferson Southern viewpoint will be the Southern viewpoint. Hamilton's manufacturing viewpoint, Northern viewpoint. Here we go. Folks, here's the story. The French Revolution of 1789. That's the story. In 1789, the same year we wrote the Constitution, the people of France led a revolution. And can anyone basically define or describe what was the revolution in France about? What was the pretense? What was who was revolting? It's a class revolution, very similar to where?
Americans.
Ladies and gentlemen, the people of France openly say they are copying the United States. They want to be like the United States. In 1789, how many democratic nations were there in the world? One. That would be who? Us. France was copying us. Some people thought that was wonderful. In fact, who do you think was the #1 bandwagon of this is the greatest thing on earth? Jefferson thought this was great because think about it. The French helped us, and now France is literally going to the point they are emulating us to become more like us. Wow, they are awesome. Folks, the problem comes is as France begins to fight, there's not a problem yet. What happens, remember earlier in our class we talked about the War of Austrian Succession and Spanish Succession, and when the Austrians and the Spanish had a civil war, what happened? But who intervenes? War of Austrian Succession, Spanish Succession. Did just Spanish and the Austrians get to fight for their own country? No, the big bad English and French came in. Well, as the French are fighting, you have their neighbors kind of going, wow, I don't know if I like this. Because let's be honest, if you're a monarchy next door like Spain, why does this freak the heck out of you? Would this encourage other stupid people to revolt? And then you've got the English who hate the French, who see the opportunity, France is weak, let's knock them out. So ladies and gentlemen, what starts as a French Revolution turns into a European war. The war, and what's so crazy is England joins the war on whose side? The old government. So literally England is supporting the old monarchy. Now, for those of you trying to figure out, folks, what starts as a French war turns into an English and French war. This changes everything. Because what happens now, before we just got to go sit back and go, France, France, France. Now we have to pick between France, or England. Because if you side with France, who's going to get pissy? And if you side with England, who gets pissy? That's the problem. Because when it was just the French Revolution, all we're doing is we love you, France. Now, you got to decide who's our buddy. Can anyone tell me? I'll let you guys be the smart ones. What Jefferson cares about? They helped us. Folks, Thomas Jefferson in this case, this is emotion, your heart, loyalty, responsibility. They helped us. Holy crap, how can you not see that? They helped us. Better yet, what are they trying to do?
Be like us.
I mean, Jefferson literally wants to shape people. What is wrong with you? They helped us fight who? The English, and they are trying to be more like us. Duh. Jefferson, in his wild imagination, cannot imagine anyone not agreeing with this. And of course, you then get who? I implied. Jefferson is largely using what thing? His emotion. None of you can disagree that the emotional tie with France is strong. The problem with Hamilton is, what does he use? Logic. Anyone want to take a wild guess in 1791, 92, who was America's largest trading partner? So now let's listen to Hamilton. Okay, so you want to go to war against England and help the Frenchies, right? We would therefore hurt our economy. We would basically go to war against our #1 trading partner. Oh, that's smart. Number two, where does America exist? Where are we? Where is our country? Okay, so in order for us to do anything, go anywhere, we have to cross what?
An ocean.
And who has the biggest, baddest, roughest navy in the world? So really what you're saying is we want to pick a fight with the country that could hurt us economically and could cut off all of our trade and beat the crap of us on the ocean, right? Hamilton's point is simple. That is dumb. That is stupid. England can hurt us. France is an isolated country in the middle of Europe with a big army. Woo! Ask Napoleon how well that worked. As everybody is yelling, Thomas Jefferson is getting so pissed off, he finally goes, okay, hold it, stop. Mr. Hamilton, you are wrong, and I've got proof. Look, right here. We signed a promise to France. We signed a piece of paper that says America pledges our loyalty to France. Remember Washington's I hate alliances? What is the piece of paper?
The alliance.
The Treaty of Alliance, which was signed after? Saratoga. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to get that in notes, because if you're not remembered, that's the fact. Jefferson is going to use the Treaty of Alliance as the weapon. You don't have a choice. We have to. We have a deal. We have a promise. Now, Aria, what will Hamilton respond?
That was to the king, and you're trying to help the peons.
Ladies and gentlemen, and Jefferson is about to just go ballistic. Alexander Hamilton literally argues that the Treaty of Alliance to bring the French into the Revolution is now void because it was signed by Louis XVI. Louis XVI's head is in a basket. In fact, Hamilton will go so far to argue, if you really want to honor the Treaty of Alliance, we should side with England because the English are actually trying to represent Louis XVI, and therefore we should help to restore a monarchy. And Jefferson just goes nuts. I mean, think of what Hamilton is saying. We want to support the government that is trying to restore a king versus the government that is trying to liberate the people. Washington will make the decision. And in all honesty, Eli was the one who was right. George Washington makes the final decision, and the decision is the Neutrality Proclamation. George Washington buys, and you do need to know that. He buys the fact that the contract was voided. The king is dead. We don't have a legal commitment. George Washington believes that our agreement was with the old government. That government is dead. That doesn't mean we have to help the English or anything like that. Washington simply argues by tearing up the treaty, or excuse me, by killing the king, the treaty was void. We do not have to help. Washington is a military man. Why does this war make absolutely no sense or purpose for the United States? We don't even have much of an army, right? We have a militia. We don't have a navy. Folks, George Washington is going to go from, other than us coming in saying we like France or hate England, what could we do? All we're going to do is piss somebody off. So the United States announces neutrality, the Neutrality Act. Folks, the Neutrality Act is 1793. This is the one, and Griffin is right. You know, and folks, you know what? I think what Griffin is saying, and I think Eli's comment before, is some people are starting to think. If you think it's dangerous, because you never know what the hell might happen. Jefferson is so pissed he resigns as Secretary of State. That is his protest. Thomas Jefferson literally says, this is a waste of my time, I think this is wrong, he resigns. That is his way of saying, I think we are betraying France. And he will again later come back as Vice President to try to get some justice. From what we just said, Thomas Jefferson does not react well to neutrality, correct? Thomas Jefferson believes we betrayed France. How about Hamilton? Hamilton, after Washington announces neutrality, Hamilton kind of thinks about it and is like, well, wait a second here. As they're busy fighting and killing each other, we can sell them food and weapons and body bags and coffins and whatever they need. I mean, seriously, in war, countries need a lot of crap, and we'll sell it to them. So Hamilton actually decides that that's not a bad philosophy, because it's basically war. Cha-ching. The only problem is that the search, siege, and impressment becomes a pain in the butt. What can you do? The next item comes off of France. So we're still in France. Citizen Genet affair. G-E-N-E-T. There's one of the little tilde hyphen marks, whatever they are over the end. Genet. Just so you know, Citizen is the nickname to the incident. His actual name is Edmund. This is it's an interesting story because it kind of shows us that there's a miscommunication. Citizen Genet is a Frenchman who comes to America. He basically comes, and here's the crazy thing. Genet arrives in America. He doesn't go to Congress. He doesn't go to the embassy. He doesn't go to the Capitol. Genet immediately goes to the bars. He then goes down to the docks. He begins to buy drinks. He begins to tell stories, and he starts recruiting Americans to go out and fight the British. He's reminding people of the war. He reminds people of Lafayette, because this is, remember how the French came before America joined? So basically, Genet is trying to encourage Americans to basically violate neutrality, help the French, and, fight those nasty English. He's doing toasts about the revolution. It's not hard to get people, blasted the English. We just beat them in a war. Well, eventually he makes his way up. Washington explains, we declared neutrality. You can't do that. Genet leaves. And guess what? He goes back to doing the same thing. So literally, this French official ignores the president, and he continues to recruit American assistance. George Washington then summons Genet to the Capitol. George Washington expels Edmund Genet from the country. And we basically send a letter to France warning them that if they will not honor the neutrality, the United States will look for other options. Just seemed technically the French government announced that they were sorry and they were going to execute Edmund Genet. But so what happens is they announced they were going to execute him. Edmund Genet, of course, gets tipped off to this. He then goes back to George Washington. He gives this great big story about how, hey, I was only told to do this. This is what my instructions were. Now they're going to kill me. And basically, George Washington agrees to grant Edmund Genet asylum. Edmund Genet lives out the rest of his life in America. And either it's a really cute story, and some people actually believe Edmund Genet would continue to act as an operative for the French government. So some people believe that entire part was a ruse so that he could stay in the country. Whether it's true or not, who knows? Next item, 1796. Folks, in 1796, we've already mentioned it once, George Washington is leaving. Sad, sad day. In 1796, for the first time in the history of the United States, we need to elect a new president. It will not be George. The people go and vote, and the people elect. In fact, that's a lie. The Electoral College elects John Adams. The second president of the United States is John Adams. For our purposes, John Adams is a Federalist, and there's going to be several problems. Number one, his vice president, see how quick you guys are, will be Thomas Jefferson. And who can tell me what do you need to identify circle star? Because when you look at the election, it's less, what's the problem? What's the problem?
Because the way they used to do vice president.
Yes. And what's wrong with that? What's wrong with the two men?
They're
Folks, that's the part that should stick out. If you have a president and vice president or a different part, that scares the crap out of people. Because think about the purpose. The vice president is a backup president. Well, now you have a situation that the president dies, the vice president completely disagrees with what the president wants. That had people worried. Because remember, if anybody didn't hear Justin, it's this idea that originally you all ran for president. There was no vice presidential position, and the runner-up became the vice president. Okay? It's like nobody would want to be the vice president.
I can see a lot of assassinations.
Well, that was kind of the fear coming, and they're going to deal with that soon. Folks, can anyone tell me what really, and let's see how quick and smart we are, what was the biggest, why did it suck to be President John Adams?
It wasn't George Washington.
Folks, no matter what John Adams ever did, he had the fact that who did people want? And he's still alive. And everybody is constantly going, well, Washington would have done this, Washington would have done this. And let's be honest, John Adams was a very good politician. He was a very smart man. He's a very educated man. But in very simple terms, he was not what? He's not George. George was a very beloved, he was a very charismatic. He was a president that had this enormous amount of respect, and he had the military credentials. John Adams does not. And we're going to see he's going to get into a conflict. John Adams becomes president, and the issue becomes, because of course his vice president is who?
Jefferson.
And what issue does Jefferson want to deal with? France. And where the problem has gotten worse is, remember, the French are mad because we didn't honor the treaty. We are neutral. And what really, really kind of like throwing gasoline on the fire, remember Jay's treaty? That was with what country? Oh, that really pissed them off. Hold on. Jay's treaty is with? Do you understand why that would piss off the French? It's not the content of the treaty, right? It's the simple fact that America is negotiating with England, America is working with England, and we kind of abandoned the French, right? So it's not about the parts of the treaty. France was mad. So Thomas Jefferson is like, we have to fix this. We have to help them. We have to work it out. And we send 3 men to go to France. So John Adams agrees. We will try to work this out. The three men, if you want to know, are named Jerry, Marshall, and Pinckney. They are fairly famous men. If you know them, great. If you don't, it won't kill you, and I'll explain why in a minute. Jerry, Marshall, and Pinckney. The 3 men go to France, and I don't know how to tell you this. If any of you have ever been to France, you'll know the feeling. The French are exceedingly rude. They basically ignore the men. Literally, the men will go to the capital. They're supposed to negotiate with the French government. Technically, the minister of France is a man named Tellier. Remember, France is still in the middle of their war. Literally, for days, the men would show up. They would sit there. I'm sorry, things came up. We don't have there's no time. The men would show, and they would wait for hours. I mean, the French were just being jerks. Well, after several days, all of a sudden, the doors open and a secretary walks out. They walk over to Jerry, Marshall, and Pinckney and say, okay, Mr. Talleyrand, can see you in a little bit. Do you have the negotiation fee? And the French government wanted a $200,000 payment to sit down and negotiate. What would be the simpler, easier word for this? A bribe, blackmail, extortion. Hey, you made an ad, and if you want to be our friend, you have to pay us. You have to, you need to give us something. Does everybody understand what the French are being jerks. They want money. Jerry, Marshall, and Pinckney stand up, they walk out, and they head home. Ladies and gentlemen, this is known as the XYZ affair. Remember I said if you know the 3 men's names, that's great, but if you don't, you probably can live. And the reason? XYZ. As America and France begin to argue about this, the most amazing thing is we soon discover that as we begin to argue with the French, they refer to the 3 Americans as monsieurs. X, Y, Z. Because the French never even got their names. So XYZ literally are Jerry, Marshall, and Pinckney. Now, folks, to me, this is where you see if you're caught up with Cleveland or not. The 3 men come home. They explain what happened. Someone tell me Hamilton's reaction. He is ecstatic. Why?
Well, now we can join England.
What are you going to do with this information? They wanted a bribe. They insulted Americans. What are you going to do with that crap? No, you're going to put it where? You are going to tell who? No. Every single American. We are going to put it in every newspaper. We are going to make it public. Look what the French did to us. Look at how they insulted us. And what is every single American going to begin to demand? War with?
France.
And if you war with France, what would you do? Holy crap, what did Hamilton want all along? Ladies and gentlemen, you got to work your way through. Make your brain stretch. Hamilton wants the alliance with England because he wants to protect what? But more specifically, trade, correct? Protect the ocean. Does everybody understand when the French come back, you need to expose this to who? The citizens. Propaganda. You take this like any other thing in history and you use it as, look at what they did. How's Jefferson going to respond? Misunderstanding. In fact, what else would Jefferson try to say? How is Jefferson going to explain this or rationalize this? We broke our promise. We had a promise. Jefferson is going to argue we lied. He does not forgive France, but he says they deserve a chance. Hamilton is clamoring for what?
War.
War. Get the people to want war. Jefferson wants to give France more time. And can anyone tell me what will be Jefferson's greatest weapon, his final trump card? How does Jefferson prevent Adams, a Federalist, from supporting Hamilton? Hamilton is like, it's in the bag. All we got to do is tell the people, and they're going to demand this. Mr. Adams, you'll be a hero. And again, like normal, Hamilton's just going, trust me, am I ever wrong? No, I'm brilliant. He's cocky. Who can tell me? How is Jefferson going to prevent it? What does Jefferson do? As Adams is thinking and Hamilton is ranting, Jefferson's like, okay, so we will tell the people. It'll lead to war. And which one of you is going to tell the entire American public that you disagree with President Washington? You could not keep the peace. Would Hamilton have a problem doing it? No. Whose job is it?
Adams.
Does Adams in any way, shape, or form want to go against Washington? No. And that's what Jefferson used. Jefferson is going to go, hey, you are going against. You are saying Washington's wrong, strong enough to do that. And guess what? Adams is not. So instead, Adams does not tell the public. Adams decides to continue to try to work with the French, but what happens? We are angry, they are angry, and an undeclared war begins. Ladies and gentlemen, starting in 1798, American and French ships begin to shoot each other. We begin to attack each other. Ships are destroyed. Men are killed. There is a war. The problem is, it's what kind of war?
Undeclared.
And just so you know, sometimes that is called a quasi-war. It's a war that doesn't really exist. People die, but no one knows about it. What is Hamilton's opinion of that? In Hamilton's world, everything is
logical.
What is the problem with this? So we are fighting who?
The French.
People are dying. We lose resources, but we don't tell anybody, so we get no from to Hamilton. This is the absolute single dumbest, most retarded thing ever done. This is stupid. I mean, this is just dumb. And as Hamilton gets mad, who does he begin to believe is the incompetent fool? Has Jefferson ever gone against his principles? Has Jefferson ever changed his viewpoint? Hamilton disagrees with Jefferson, but he understands Jefferson. Which one is a gutless coward?
Adams.
Yeah. Think of the point. We go to war. We are fighting the French. We refuse to tell anybody, and therefore we cannot butter up to England. That is stupid. Hamilton's view. Please write down the Naval Act of 1798. The Naval Act of 1798 creates the first United States Navy. Okay? Folks, the Naval Act of 1798 shows you how bad the undeclared war was. The United States is going to spend thousands of dollars building a navy to protect our trade. This navy actually begins to erase the great economics. We begin to go into a debt because we're building a navy. Warships are expensive. Why are we doing it? Because without a navy, we can't protect any of our shipping, our ocean, our trade. Skip, skip, skip. The war goes on. People are dying. Hamilton is flipping out. We get to 1800. Who could tell me? 1800. What is the issue? What is the item? You should be fast, quick, hard. It's an election year. Get used to it. Every 4 years, election year. And what is going to be Hamilton's target? President Adams. Ladies and gentlemen, Hamilton is going to become ruthless. And what is the two choices he is going to give Adams? Either we go to war, or I'm going to make you look like an incompetent, worthless fool. And Hamilton is aggressive, and he is going to be public. And basically, he is making Adams look weak, weak, weak. And how can Adams salvage this? By changing his policy, going to war, and then Hamilton pulls the dogs back, right? Very simple. Problem. In the year 1800, France gets a new leader. The revolution is over. The new leader is a military man named Napoleon Bonaparte. So here comes Napoleon.